Hey guys, this is Dagon123, and welcome to
Tenchicast.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the next exciting episode of Tenchicast, presented by Tenchiforum.com. A year and a half ago, Tenchicast sat down with news of new novels in the form of Paradise War, and the aim of letting fans of Tenchi in onto the inner workings of new projects. In that time, a lot has changed, so in our now annual No Need for the Future episode in the series of Tenchicast, we are going to assess once given predictions and look at even more wild news and speculation. With me today I have Chuck,
Sup, dogs?
Crazed,
What's going on, everybody?
Pie,
Long live the new flesh.
Nil,
I'd like 2 eggs over hard. Don't tell me, I know, it's hard on the arteries, but old habits die hard. Just about as hard as I want those eggs.
and Who.
Who cares about Tenchi Muyo? You know he does.
So one of the big bombs dropped in the last 2 months was thanks to director Hiroshi Negishi via Twitter, that not only was Tenchi Muyo in Love 3 going to be a thing, but that a big chunk of the framework he had would end up becoming Tenchi Muyo. What are your thoughts on the idea of an In Love 3? What would you have liked to see it do, and what are your thoughts on how some of those ideas were used in Tenchi Muyo?
Well, it was very interesting to see Negishi open up so much to fans towards the end, and at the very end of Tenchi's run. He'd been talking a little bit previously about how there were some things he wanted to mention while the show was airing, but couldn't for whatever reason, or just simply didn't want to. Wanted everybody to just enjoy the show, enjoy the ride while it was going on. At the very end, he did mention that there was an In Love 3 at some point that was being looked into back in 2009. And it just never got to happen. Never got off the ground for whatever reason. He didn't specify if it was money or because they just, they didn't think there was going to be enough interest or whatever. But it didn't happen. Sat on the back burner for a while until the idea of another Tenchi idea came around. What should we do? 20th anniversary is here or is coming up. We should do something. This was a huge thing for us. This is a huge deal for everybody. They're pulling all the stops. They're pulling Negishi back into direction. They're calling they got a new guy in. So okay, look, we need you to do the artwork. You did Durara and Gundam Build Fighters, right, or whatever. Yeah, you good enough. The people like your art style. You do the thing. Make the squiggles, and we'll follow you from there. They wanted to get new Tenchi, the fresh face, but still make it familiar to everybody who loved it in the first place. What they had sitting on hand was what they had written up for Tenchi Muyo in Love 3, which was originally going to be, yes, another movie, fourth one. And as he revealed, the basic idea of In Love 3 was going to be that Washu was going to perform an experiment which was going to make the Galaxy Police suddenly go, whoa, okay, we need to do something about this. They were going to come to Earth. There's going to be a fight between the Masaki household and the Galaxy Police, which is going to be interesting because you've got, Mahoshi and Kiyone in the Masaki household, so they'd have to deal with the politics of, okay, we're fighting against the Galaxy Police again. But that didn't really go anywhere. Now, what we did learn from Negishi was that back when that movie was in production, not only was Kiyone Makibi going to be a major role in it because she's a Galaxy Police officer and she did not show up in I for whatever reason, but also that Nobuyuki and Katsuhito were going to have major roles in the film as well. And they similarly were cut out of I for reasons that he has, as far as I've seen, has not gone into detail about. But that was it. The basic framework was Washu's going to cause some problems on Earth with some experiment. The Galaxy Police are going to say no to that, move in, and there was going to be a fight between them. The final 2 weeks of I was basically what the movie, it was a very condensed version of what the movie was supposed to be. Like, they removed a lot of detail and crammed it in at the very last minute. But that's what it was. Now that we know that, we look back on it and think, wow, this could have been a full length regular movie until whatever AIC's funding not being what it is. They needed some help, and Takahashi City stepped in and said, "Well, look, we could, maybe we could use one of those advertising animes, get some of those characters that we can use for posters and online and stuff to say, hey, yeah, I know that Momo girl, she's from the Takahashi City advertising anime, right? Yeah, the I Tenchi Muyo." Some sacrifices had to be made. So as fans, we have to sit and think and wonder, maybe what could have been. If Takahashi City wasn't necessarily needed, if In Love 3 had actually gone through. I would have loved to see it. I would have loved to have seen, strictly focusing on the combat between the Masaki household and the Galaxy Police. It's not something that they haven't already done before, but more of that is perfectly welcome. I mean, I would have been interested to see what the initial idea for Washu's experiment would have been that would have caused them to go here in the first place, because from the way that it sounded, it wasn't going to be what I turned out, where they were calling in some Jiraiyan royalty or some form of nobility of Jirai's from another dimension and crossing the streams and causing all sorts of problems. It was something else, but we don't know what. This would be fun to speculate. Like, what kind of madness would Negishi and company have had written up for that movie? I thought it was great. Like, I think even for the people who weren't big fans of the show, they agree that the last 2 to 3 weeks of I Tenchi was exactly what they were hoping for. And I think that goes to show the strengths. That's what they'd been thinking about from the get-go. And that's what people like the most, because that's classic Tenchi. Negishi knew it. Everybody involved in the project knew it. It's what they've been building towards. It's what Negishi had been teasing since the show started, saying, look, just don't worry about it. Wait till the end. You're going to be happy. And everybody was happy because it was the exact classic Tenchi that they were hoping for. Nobody had changed a bit. So I'm pretty happy with how they used the ideas from, In Love 3 and I Tenchi. I wish they were able to explore it a little bit more. For whatever reasons they didn't or weren't able to. Now, of course, there's the question of could they still do an In Love 3? Sure. It'd probably have to be very different. You can't reuse the same script twice. That'd just be madness. But, I really don't know where they would go. I'm kind of happy not knowing where it would go. I'd rather just be surprised. Drop it on me, man. It's if an In Love 3 happens, it could be whatever, man. I got faith in the Gishi and company to give it to me again.
It is amazing what Nil said, that In Love 3 was supposed to be a thing, and then it ended up becoming I Tenchi in large parts. It still amazes me that Negishi was looking to do In Love 3 back in 2009, which is the same year in Japan that War on Geminar came out. And both Inoue and Miura, the head honchos of AIC, weren't confident that Tenchi would sell in 2009. As War on Geminar was being made, they didn't think they could make money off of it. And, later on down the road, they told Negishi, well, hey, let's do a mini series that's like, I forget the exact numbers, like 100-something episodes at like 90 seconds apiece. And then Takahashi showed up and said, we'd like an advertisement series. And then it got changed again, and that's where I came from. But, as far as my thoughts of an In Love 3 and what I'd like to see in it, I agree with Nil. I think they could do an In Love 3. The script, like you said, would have to be altered because you can't reuse, even though that was the original idea for In Love 3, it was already used in I. You really can't tread the same territory twice. And as much as Negishi had talked about how In Love 3 was almost a thing on Twitter, I think he'd be willing to go back and make it In Love 3 and write a new script for it, which I hope he does. And as far as what I'd love to see in it, I'm not really sure. With the way In Love 2 ended off, you could say that was somewhat of the definitive ending of that universe right there with the way In Love 2 ended. I wish In Love 3 would expound a little bit more upon the whole which girl he gets with. It's implied in Love 2 that it's Ryoko, and that would be the end of it. But, I provided Tenchi a rebirth, so to speak, a revival of the franchise, which is what Negishi said I was, because Negishi had considered the franchise dead for so long, and he came along and revived it with I. And I did that. It provided it with a second life. But everything before any of those continuities, OVA, Universe, Tokyo, whatever, none of them have really had a definitive ending. They've always left off on a, well, there could be more later on type note. And I would just like to see a definitive ending to one of those continuities before anything new happens. I mean, will I get that, and will that be the case? I don't know, maybe, maybe not. But I would just like to see a definitive end somewhere so that this rebirth process can really start off strong. And that's what I would hope to see in an In Love 3.
Well, being as this is a No Need for the Future podcast, I'm going to try and keep my comments toward the future, as it were. Nil and Crazed did an excellent job translating Negishi's tweets on Twitter, and that's where we're getting all of this fantastic information from. And they really did an excellent job laying out the path that we got to get to I. Going forward, I think In Love 3 is definitely a possibility, if not a strong possibility. I think, yeah, they would have to maybe tweak the existing script a little bit because parts of it were used in I, so they are going to have to change a little bit, but not too much, I think. The first two Tenchi Muyo in Love movies followed very similar themes and feels. There was a very distinct sense of going to a different time and place, and coming from the universe continuity, it's made all the more relevant by the time and space adventures. And so we continuously see either different dimensions or time travel involved in the In Love movies, and we did sort of see that in I as well. And so I think if there is going to be an In Love 3, which again I repeat is not an improbable thing at this point, I'm kind of hoping we see something like that as well. We sort of got a hint from I that In Love 3 would have involved going back even farther in time to like the very beginnings of the dry influence in Japan and on Earth, like the very beginnings of the Misaki clan at what would be the shrine. And so that's something that would be really interesting to see. For me, though, the most important part to come out of these tweets with Negishi is the fact that he's back in a big way. And not only is he back, he never left. And we never knew that until we always just assumed that once 1999 happened and Tenchi Muyo in Love 2 came out in theaters, that was the end of Negishi, that he left, that he retired, at least from Tenchi. But these tweets have shown that that is not the case at all. He was heavily involved with AIC all the way through that time period, up until 2009, like Craze said. So he's got the fire back in his willingness to work on this franchise again. And so for me, keeping my eyes toward the future, Negishi's the one to watch. He is the one that is going to be the main mover and shaker in the franchise, and that's my bet for the future.
Well, just restating the question, what were my thoughts on the idea of In Love? When first heard of that breaking straight from Negishi himself, all these good feels come flooding back, like no way, and thinking, man, what could have been, and I think I'll probably get into it later. What still could be, but I think the most profound thing for me was what was touched upon before by Chuck, is that Negishi and the producers like Inoue, all throughout what many of us have considered kind of a low period for Tenchi as a franchise and the fandom, as much as we were being quote unquote faithful and keeping the memory of our favorite series alive, and a lot of us thinking that was all it would be, is just keep the memory alive. All the while, they were still thinking about Tenchi 2. They were remembering the good old times, and they were looking towards the future all that time. So when I heard about that, I felt as a fan a camaraderie with one of the creative forces behind Tenchi like I never had before.
To say that I'm a big fan of Negishi's work would be a bit of an understatement. I won't go too deep into that, but needless to say, Tenchi Muyo in Love was probably one of my favorite anime films of all time. And Tenchi Muyo in Love 2 is not that far behind it. I've studied those two films in depth, and as Chuck mentioned a moment ago, they have a lot of themes in common. They have a lot of plot elements in common. Both of them have Washu tweaking around with some technology with dry and tree magic to do wacky space-time things, whether it's traveling back in time, locking Kane in subspace, or breaking into Harness' little pocket universe. They also have the Galaxy Police tech being used at different points. The dimensional cannon in the first film, the dimension locking equipment in the second film. And then you look at the third season, or the last 2 weeks of I, where you have Washu using Toshika's different dry and tree magic along with the dimension oscillating bullet, which is a reference back to Tenchi Universe Episode 8, mind you, all in tandem to essentially try and set right what once went wrong. And I start to think, what could possibly be happening in Love 3? If this was originally the script for In Love 3, how much of this could have been used there? I think a lot of it could. Again, all of it seems to fit with the same kind of themes and tropes that they've been used in the previous two In Love films. As far as what would I have liked to see it do, or some of the thoughts I could have used that it would have been used in Tenchi or Tenchi in Love 3. One thing that always tickled my imagination about the In Love movies, is particularly the first one, was that at the end, Achika gives the Tenchikin back to Ayaka and says, "Give this back to Tenchi. I think he's going to need it again someday." He's already used the sword to take down Kagato at the end of Universe, and of course she used it. Achika used it to fight Kane in Tenchi Muyo in Love. Yosho used it to cut down the harness tree in Love 2. One wonders that if the Tenchikin might have been another big element in Love 3. More importantly, in the last couple episodes of I, you have not only Tenchikin being used, but whatever name Momo's sword was, because it was a big talisman, a big plot point the entire way through. Might we have actually seen Achika's, what I like to think of as Achika's prophecy, that Tenchi will need this again someday, come to fruition finally in Tenchi Muyo in Love 3. That would have been how he would have used it, what he would have used it for, what would he have been doing, would have been a great thing to see, I think. I think that could still be extrapolated. Similarly, you have Kane. Kane is one of my favorite. It's got a special place in my heart. We never really know much about him, except he's the anti-Jirai, the opposite of Jirai. However, at the end of Universe, you also have mentioned that there's this darkness of the universe where Kagato refined and strengthened his Jirai power. Those two threads might have come to fruition in Love 3. Notice in Love 2 never really brings up those points again. He never references the battle with Kane in the film before it, except to reference that Achika and Nobuyuki had a kid. The fight with Kagato is not really mentioned at all, even though they introduce more drama with what Yosho did in the past. Might some of those threads have actually come to fruition and made a nice trilogy of films with Tenchi Muyo in Love 1, 2, and 3, tying all of it together into a nice bow at the very end of the series. Moreover, could we have seen essentially the end, as Craze and some of the others have mentioned a moment ago? We have actually seen the wedding, the final nail in the coffin as far as Tenchi's relationship with the girls? Might he have actually made his choice and followed through with it, given us a definitive end? And of course, knowing Washu with her wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey nonsense, that might not have been the end. It's possible that because of reasons, because of plot, because of the Galaxy Police's interference, the big reset button got pushed, and we get a new continuity out of it. Especially now that we've got I-Tenchi now. It's possible that the alternate universe where Momo and Benny were, so you can actually somehow tie that together at In Love 3. Possibly creates this universe, or vice versa. The way I-Tenchi ended, that it creates the universe that In Love 3 is going to come into play. I don't know. There's so much that could be played off of, so many themes that have already been established that could be followed up on. It would be great to have a nice capstone for the In Love movies to give him a definitive end and say, we done, and this is a full, complete story.
I can I can tell you that immediately, and Nil and Craze were in here when they dropped this news on me. I was kind of in semi-shock when Negishi dropped that nugget on Twitter, because beforehand we would have never known. In fact, we didn't find out until 5 years later, after this proposed project had was possibly a thing at AIC, and we wouldn't have found out if Negishi hadn't have told us straight up. And Negishi has been a real eye-opener as far as some of the inner workings at AIC have gone. But even more so with the ending of I, the last 2 weeks, like Nil mentioned, were essentially an integral part of how the original part of In Love 3 was supposed to be. I think the fact that, just the fact that we're going through with it, or that we're going through this and talking about it, I think it sucks that it didn't happen. I mean, In Love 3, especially at around the time that, just how Tenchi was as a franchise in general, I think it would have been nice to see it, but I think for it to come out when it did, I think the timing kind of would have been wrong as well, because, Negishi has said much of himself as much as he has talked with, and what Inoue has said on, their how much they were following Tenchi as a franchise. I mean, Negishi referred to it as a dead franchise after War on Geminar. And, that sentiment, and with the way that they weren't pushing Geminar, I think having In Love 3 come out after that, like right after that, I don't think that would have been the best time to do it. But now, it's kind of like the martyr, so to speak. Like, I'm glad that In Love 3 was repurposed in some ways into I, because not only did it make I a better series for it, now not only seeing I, but what we were told was in Love, but also what it became, because now we have Negishi coming back, fire's lit back under his butt. 20th anniversary celebration. AIC is now owned by themselves. That's something that we didn't cover in the that was in the last Future Cast, was the fact that AIC bought themselves back for $77. They can now push whatever they want to, and they're pushing I to the moon. I has a ton of merchandise. Now is the right time to Now is the right time to go into and start an In Love 3, because now they can get 100% behind it. Everybody at AIC can, put pen to paper and go for it. Now is the time to grasp the future. The content of what In Love 3 would have been, there's not a 100% conclusiveness to it, because obviously Negishi didn't just say, and here's my original draft. But you kind of have to ask yourself, much like Pi did, like where would a third movie go if we're following in chronologically after In Love 2? And from the way that Negishi had talked about the original, he had said that Washu had done something, and then there would have been a fight between the family and the Galaxy Police. But there's always a part of us that we look at how the OVA did things in Tokyo and everything. Universe was always really good about leaving just a little bit open, but tying everything up with a nice bow, whether that be the series or both movies. And I'd like to think that as much as we would have seen, I'd like to think that in an In Love 3, they would kind of just, make it an adventure of some type, make it action. Maybe not spend as much time as they did on stuff in Love 2. And I'm not even about to say I don't love In Love 2, because In Love 2 is my favorite of the 3 Tenchi movies made, and hopefully a 4th. But I just think that the proposed point in 2009 and 2011, I don't think... I'm glad that I did what it did, and I think, now is the time to grasp the future, and now would be the time to have In Love 3 come out. Another one of the big news bulletins that had come out over the last year and a half since the last cast was Paradise War ending and the release of the If Dojins, and Kajishima's afterword in the latest set of Dojins saying that the anime projects were not moving forward. At this juncture in time, do you think OVA 4 or any of the OVA related timelines still have a possibility of being made into anime? Do you think that Kajishima has finally hit the end?
This question makes me chuckle a bit because I'm thinking back to the last time we did one of these No Need for the Future casts, and we had just gotten word of Paradise War, this upcoming novel series that may or may not have been somehow related with the main plot of Tenchi Muyo. And here we are a year and a half later. It came and went with a whisper. There was no fanfare, no anything, and these things just sort of slid out the back door and were generally worthless. No one really cared what was in them because there really wasn't anything in them. And so that was a bit of a surprise, looking back, how much we were hyping these things up. As for the OVA at this point, I really don't see a way forward, at least with Kajishima at the helm, because as he himself said, like he's had a run of bad luck. The AIC has not gone with his stuff, and I'm not going to comment on what those possible reasons will be, because I'm sure that's a discussion for another time. But he's pretty much out in the cold. They've decided not to go with him, and they've hitched their wagons with Negishi, and I think that's great. That's what this franchise needs. But at the same time, it is a shame because it means we probably aren't going to get a conclusion to the OVA line. But at this point, it might be better to just let it die. I don't know if he's reached the end. He's still going to be coming to Comic-Con every year, obviously. He's still going to be putting out doujins. So there's always going to be that. But as far as him getting anything Tenchi Muyo related animated again with him at the helm, I think it's done. We've seen the last Kajishima Tenchi Muyo anime.
As far as what Kajishima may or may not do, I'm not gonna say OVA 4 will never happen because karma's a bitch, and I'm sure the moment that I announce to the world that it'll never happen, next day it would, because karma. But in his latest doujin, he said that next year, well, not next year, over this summer, the summer of 2015, that he didn't have any idea for any future publications as far as, I guess, his doujins were concerned. He said he was going to take a bunch of his old doujins, make some edits, put them all together in one doujin and resell them. And that was what Comiket was going to be. I think he's nearing the end, or I think his idea well is starting to dry up. And maybe he's starting to realize that somewhat. Like Chuck said, AIC owns themselves now. They can do whatever they want. And I don't think they're going to go with Kajishima anymore. Again, I don't know for certain that they won't, but I don't think that they will, because it sounds like the first If doujin where we saw Ryoko and Ayaka's daughters, that was his, this is what I want OVA 4 to be, and I'm going to go pitch it to AIC and see if they'll give it to me. Seems like that's what he did, and AIC turned him down. The exact reason as to why, who knows? Maybe it was based off of the content. Maybe it was because he more than likely wanted an OVA budget, and they just don't have the money to give him that. And as far as Paradise War is concerned, like Chuck said, Whisper came and went, and it is done. There were 3 novels made. Doesn't look like anything else is going to happen to it. I think a part of that is because Kajishima really didn't have anything to do with Paradise War in general. He created it. It's his original idea. He gave the character some form of, they're 4,000 something in the line for the Throne of Jirai. So he, there it is. There's the tie-in to Tenchi, like always. But he didn't write the novels, and he didn't draw anything for the novels. Someone else did that. And I think that's a big part of the reason why that Paradise War just didn't go anywhere, because he wasn't involved with it. So I don't really know what he's going to keep doing. He'll probably try and keep making doujins, but it looks like he's extended the GXP novels too. And I think the if dojins are going to be a big thing he's going to try and continue, because now that this year we got if 3A, so there's going to be a multiple parter to the third series of if dojins. And he also released a second if dojin called, right, I haven't grown anything since elementary school part 1 temporary. Looks like it's just another spin-off he's trying to get made. He admits that he can't explain what's going on in that dojin because it's tied to an anime proposal that he's got in the works. So it looks like as far as Kajishima is concerned, he's just trying to get another spin-off off of the ground. And this one might even be a spin-off to War on Geminar, maybe. Don't really know. It's kind of what I'm guessing at this point. But I think Kajishima is on the downhill slide, as it were. I think he had his 15 minutes of fame, well, really his years, because of his 3 contract deal with OVA 3, GXP, and War on Geminar. But again, I'm not going to say definitive he's done. OVA 4 is never going to get made, but like I said, he looks like he's on the downhill slide, and he may check out sooner or later.
Well, so I wasn't here for the last cast for No Need for the Future, so I wasn't actually here when Paradise War was announced. I think 2 had come out a few months prior to me coming back to the fandom, and 3 came out sometime last year. So I wasn't really around for the speculation on all that. It apparently didn't last very long, only 3 volumes. He may come back to it eventually. GXP was supposed to have ended on novel 10, and now it's getting 2 more novels. 11 just came out a couple weeks ago, and I believe 12 is scheduled for March of this year. He's pushing those out, so he may come back to Paradise War eventually. For the time being, it is over, and who knows what will become of that. Obviously not much really so far, because it wasn't very popular from the looks of it. Like, they could have been good books, but they just didn't really catch on with mainline Tenchi fans. Similarly, we see him struggling to get anything made in the animation department, as he came out and said in last year's dojins he had many projects that he was working on that he wanted to proceed with, but he needed to get the right people on his side, give him some money, give him the time, give him the crew, and let it happen. And as he's confirmed for us with this most recent set of dojins, that didn't happen. He'd claimed that if the very first one when it came out, was the storyboard for what he was pitching, and they told him no. He's continuing to draw his if dojins, and he's now since said that he isn't getting anywhere with those on the animation front. So I think it's safe to say that if an OVA 4 does happen, or any continuation of the OVA does happen, it will probably have nothing to do with all of the babies. Like, this is just him getting it all out of his system now, because I think he's more aware now than ever before that he's simply never going to see those things on moving on a TV screen. It's just going to be dojins. So people who want that, you will get your answers. You'll get to see that version of the timeline that could have been, if only, in these dojins. I just don't think that they're going to go anywhere. I don't think that's going to be it. With the green if, I haven't grown anything since grade school or elementary school, however you want to put it, part 1, temporary, tentative, whatever, he's obviously still got some ideas. He's pulling from the same type of well as his previous outings. He's got a lot of trees, very lush imagery. He's actually changed his art style a little bit for this new dojin to reflect, I guess, something else he's just trying here. And he's talking about how he can't tell anybody what's in that, because he's also trying to push that as a new series. And I think, if anything that he's got rolling right now, that's probably his best bet. Because if we look at Geminar didn't even have the Tenchi name attached to it. It was related, but in Japan, it had nothing to do with Tenchi and the branding. Like, people who were in the know, were in the know, they realized, like, oh, that's supposed to be this person. It wasn't like it threw it in your face at every juncture, like how GXP kind of was, like, this is a continuation of Tenchi Muyo. Geminar was its own thing. and it did better for it, I think. And it was overall a much better show than GXP in most people's eyes. Be that bias or just the fact that it was better written and taken care of, who knows? I think this new show, if it does become a show and not just a doujin, that's got the best chance of happening because he's got some interesting ideas going into it, a little bit of mystery, but it's going to be tangibly related. There will be connections to the franchise as a whole. That's how it works. It will always be that way. It just won't be mainline, and I think an OVA 4 could be possible. I don't think Masaki Kajishima will be the one who is writing it. I think somebody else will have to do it if they want something to happen, and they've got a hell of a job ahead of them because OVA 3 did not leave things on an easy terms to pick back up from. If being what it is, it's just saying, okay, here we see all of them getting pregnant, having kids, and I mean all of them, even the Cabot, mind you, and here's what happens with their lives from here on out. I'm sure there's some people who want that, and you will get that. You will get how you want to see that with the If Dojins. I just don't think that's going to be animated, and I think Kajishima is very well aware of that. I don't think it's the end for him. He'll still continue to do his dojins. His fans will get what they want, and that's fantastic. You shouldn't just not have your answers. You shouldn't just have it stop dead end. You'll get them. You'll get your answers in the dojins or the novels, however you want. That's cool. In terms of animation, he may get something like Geminar again, but OVA 4, outlook's doubtful.
Well, not to rehash a lot of what's been said, because I think those are all very astute points. The question of, is this the end of Tenchi OVA? Is this the end of Kajishima? I think what Nil touched upon is what the main point I was going to drive home is I think what is coming to an end is Kajishima being synonymous with Tenchi, the franchise, and vice versa. As was said, is Kajishima done? Is he going to quit doing dojins? I certainly don't think so. I don't think he's done doing dojins, and I hope he goes on to different things and new characters and new avenues for him. He doesn't have to tie everything into Tenchi. He probably will at some minimal level, and that's his thing. That's fine. I think that's going to go on. Tenchi material, we'll see, because he probably took a bit of a blow knowing that If is not going to be. I don't think If will be animated. I don't think AIC is going to go with that. And if they did OVA 4, which I personally think is rather doubtful, but if OVA was animated in some form, it would not be If. And I don't even know if Kajishima, how much he would be attached to it. But has Kajishima hit his end, so to speak? In terms of Kajishima's involvement in the animation world, and he could continue, he could get work in like hentai or something like that if he went down that avenue. That's probably a sandbox he's more familiar with, really, if you actually read his dojins and such. But in terms of Kajishima, and quote unquote the end, and possibly venting a bit, and fans pointing the finger at AIC for not picking up his stuff, but really, as much as we rag on him for various things, Kajishima's worst enemy, I think, is Masaki Kajishima. Case in point, War on Geminar, for the flaws that it had, I enjoyed it, and I wanted to enjoy it, and I wanted it to do well. I wanted Kajishima to be able to go in a direction other than Tenchi, and the way Geminar went, after seeing it, I said, okay, that has potential. That could go on in some way. It wasn't a huge hit, but it could go on. And then we see he's doing the same thing he's doing with the Tenchi characters. He's now doing with Geminar. He's ruining any chance he would have for that, or Geminar would have with his own work. If you look at it, the way it continues in his writings as of right now is for the purposes of the Sakishi breeding program. I'm not exaggerating. It's a breeding program. Tenchi has to, and not just his material, as it were, as though he were some sort of horse out to stud, but he has to actually have sex with, guess who? Chiaya's mother, and probably all of the girls' mothers. So here we have, what a twist on the harem dynamic. Not only does Kenshi get his own harem, but he gets another harem, is the mothers of each girl in the harem, and you're just like, I'm sorry if that's your thing. Okay, but one, at what point does it become ridiculous? I'm curious to know. And two, in terms of something getting animated, that's that's just not going to catch producers' attention. That doesn't scream, yeah, yeah, I'll put money behind that. I bet most people will want to see that. No, they don't. Most people don't want that. So now I'm seeing before us right now, I think, as of this next No Need for the Future cast, unfortunately, I think he's killed Geminar as well. And that was entirely his project, and it was entirely his doing. And I think he messed it up for himself. If he wants to continue it in his own way with his Dojin material, that's fine. Of course, I absolutely. If he should be allowed to do what he wants, but I just don't like it when he'll probably turn around again, as he has with If and Tenchi and I being animated. He'll then turn around and say, "Oh, that AIC, they're not working with me to animate my stuff." Well, it's because they're not bound to a contract with you anymore, and they're a business, and they're not going to throw money at something that's clearly just not going to do well. So you can't have it both ways, Mr. Kajishima. If you want to do it absolutely the way you want, and you want your main character to just be stupidly overpowered and have sex with everyone and the end, that's fine. But don't expect it to get animated, because after everything AIC's gone through, as previously mentioned, they bought themselves back for pennies on the dollar, a company for like 70 some dollars American. uh, they're not going to do that anymore. And I think, yeah, we're going into a new era with Tenchi, and it's going to go in a different direction than one that Mr. Kajishima would like to see it.
I think Who pretty much has said the bulk of everything and Who, Nil, and everyone else has pretty much said the bulk of everything, and that is Brett screwed Brett. That's right. Kajishima screwed Kajishima. So, what can we talk about? What can we say? Well, let's be blunt. Let's look at the end of OVA 3. You want to talk about where OVA 4 could go? Well, if it's going to be a direct sequel to OVA 3, then you've got Tenchi, who is arguably the most powerful being in the universe and is unquestionably undefeatable. Even in GXP, there's mention in the later episodes that Tarrant actually tried to attack the Misaki household on Earth, off-screen, mind you, and was beaten back easily with zero effort. So, needless to say, if you have anyone who goes against the Misaki household at this point in the OVA continuity, they're pretty much going to have to be gods. Essentially, you would have to break down and have the Chosen fight amongst themselves to have any kind of viable adventure or battle-type conflict. Drama-wise, Kajishima's Dojins have pretty much written that out too, because, to be blunt, as Who just said, Tenchi has married them all. He has had children with them all, and moreover, his children are marrying Seina's children from the harem over in GXP. So everybody's hunky dory, everybody's happy rainbows and kittens, except Noike for some reason. For some reason, her child has something wrong with her. I don't remember what it was, but. And other than that, I mean, you don't see if you read Kajishima's If Dojin so far, If 1, If 2, and If 3A, if you read all three of them, the children are, for lack of a better word, ordinary. They grow up, they go to school, they have onsen scenes with the protagonist from the other series, and they get married too. I mean, there's nothing interesting about it. There's no adventure, there's no action, there's no space, there's no space. There's nothing. There's nothing that can be really animated. I can't blame AIC for, if that was their pitch, if that was Kajishima's pitch, I don't blame AIC at all. There's no adventure, there's no interest. Is it possible that, do you want to see a conclusion to how things go? Do you want to see where Kajishima would have taken things? Okay, fine. There's the If Dojins. But that's not going to sell. There are slice of life shows, that's true, but one of the big advantages and one of the big draws for many people to Tenchi Muyo, and why Tenchi has taken off, is because there's adventure, there's action, there's conflict, there's something going on. Not just kids going to school. Not just kids going to school and having hunky-dory lives. In fact, the most extraordinary thing that's happened in F1, 2, and 3A was Ryoko's daughter floats Ryo-Ohki's children. Yes, Ryo-Ohki has a litter. Yes, I'm not exaggerating in the least. All three of them pop and turn into humans. That's about it. That's about all the extent of them. And Noike's child has some emotional issue. That's it. That is entirely the content of the if dojins. If you want, go look them up real quick. That's it. That's it. Where can the OVA go? If it's just going to be kids growing up in a normal high school with nothing going on except normal high school stuff, I'll be blunt. That's not Tenchi. That's not Tenchi to me. Where's the high space adventure? Where's the space combat scenes? Where's the grand battle with a Kagato like villain or Kane like villain? The if dojins aren't giving us that. That's not that I'm likely to believe that's not going to sell. And I think unless there is a real twist with the OVA storyline in the not too distant future, I'm going to say right now OVA is dead. That it's killed. It's dead. It's been someone took a knife to it. That's where it is. Is Kajishima done? I'm sure Kajishima is going to keep writing his Comiket dojins. He's going to keep going to Comiket. He's going to keep pitching his stuff until he gets tired of it. I'm not going to say Kajishima's done. I think Kajishima is going to keep going until he gets bored with it. However, again, I'll be blunt. I'll reiterate essentially and expound upon what Who has said already, which is look at Kajishima's CV. Go to A&N and look up Masaki Kajishima and look at all the things that are listed for him. Half of them are Tenchi, and most of those are listed. He's listed as original creator or character designer. He's not actually listed as director or writer for most of them. He's listed in a subsidiary role. Moreover, if you look at all the stuff that's not Tenchi, most of it's porn. Most of his hentai anime, and that's the truth. Look up. I would not recommend this unless you're of this persuasion. But most of his dojins that aren't Tenchi, that aren't directly Tenchi, and even some that are directly Tenchi, are hentai dojins. They are pornography. Masaki Kajishima, to be blunt, is a pornographer, and as such, very likely, the only way that the OVA line or Geminar line or anything else that he wants to write is going to be pornographic. And I'm sorry, this is my opinion. I'll be completely upfront about it, but I don't want Tenchi to become a pornography series. I want Tenchi to be a space fantasy series like the first OVA was. Does it have ecchi elements in it? Yes. That's been part of it since OVA 1 episode 4. Hell, even episode 3 had a little bit of sexual tension between Ayaka and Tenchi. I can live with that. Not when the whole show turns into a pornography series. I'm thinking, as far as animations work, if he wants to go down the pornography route, he's not getting anything animated because AIC is not going to fund it, and they're the ones who hold the rights. And I'm sorry. He'll continue making work, but I don't think it's going to be animated.
As everyone has, in some way, shape, or form, so eloquently said, I will chime in and say that no, I do not think an OVA 4 will be made at this point, or any point in the near future, and I don't think he's out of ideas. But I just got done saying there's not going to be an OVA 4. Some people, some listeners, might look at that and say, well, but if he's not out of ideas, why won't there be an OVA 4? Well, let's look at some of the ideas that he's put out. There's nothing to them. As many have said, if we get into the if dojins, then the if dojins, as they were made, as Masaki Kajishima said in the afterwards of the Seikishi bonds that accompanied them, the first if was made exclusively as a way to pitch to AIC. I can see why AIC didn't bite. The point is made very clear that, if this is supposed to be OVA 4, and we said this I said this in a previous cast, is that it? Is that all there is? In 10 years between OVA 3 and now? Is that it? Is that all there is? I'll be honest with you. The comparison has been made a number of different times. I hate George Lucas for what he did to Star Wars, but I would take Starkiller any day of the week over anything that has been put in the if dojins, because at least Starkiller did something. And okay, well, who talked about War on Geminar? Let's look at War on Geminar. What happened? Tenchi sleeps with Kiai's mom. The end. And everybody watches. But for the people who liked War on Geminar, for the people who loved War on Geminar, why did they like it? Because things happened. They didn't happen all the time, obviously. There was a big span in the middle where nothing happened, but things happened. And the characters who did it went from no character, if they were just a side character, to pretty decent. But things happened. That's why we wanted to see them. And the things that happened were also things that were relative to anime at the time. A lot of people have come into War on Geminar and have liked it on some way, shape, or form. That's cool. But with a proposed sequel like that, with something that is essentially for all intents and purposes the end game, that's not going to be made into an anime. That's not something that you can capitalize on. And all right, so now we ask the question, what else is there? Well, GXP is not going to be made into an anime. I mean, that could change now that Kajishima's plans have, not exactly gone according to what he would like to do. But he said no to GXP being animated because damn that Nabashin, he ruined it. And Tenchi is now out because we have the proof positive that he said himself, they did not bite on the if dojins, and he is now going to explain in GXP 11 afterward why. Paradise War got 3 novels that he was, only a part of in concept. Now some might be listening and say, but Dagon, you said that OVA 4 was going to be made and stood on that point in the last podcast. And while technically I did say that, I also reiterated in that previous cast that OVA 4 really was just a placeholder for any mainline Tenchicast show that came up, which came up in the form of Tenchi Muyo. Now, while I may not have been technically correct, I also was not technically wrong. Ultimately, I want to be excited, like Who said. I want to be excited for something that Kajishima comes out with. We look at the Green If Dojin. You look at that, and that's something. There might be something there. But ultimately, I can't get excited about it because I haven't really been given a reason to. It's shallow. It's shallow, faceless characters doing shallow, faceless things. And when you have too many characters, you have no characters. And I said this about a Tenchi Muyo show, which inevitably it will be marked in on because it's Tenchi Muyo if Dojin, I can't believe that my plants are this cute. Inevitably, what is there? What is there? I said with a Tenchi Muyo show lives and dies by how good its characters are. What are we ever going to see that? I don't think so. And if the other 3 shows that he's done in the past 10 years are anything to go by, there's nothing to get excited about. They're all going to be the same formula. They're all going to be done the same way. And oftentimes, we're going to have to pay money to get dojins that won't actually explain everything and will just kind of leave things loose-ended. We still don't know why Mihoshi, quote-unquote, may or may not have died. We don't know that point either. So, ultimately, to capstone this whole thing off, as was said earlier with if AIC was afraid of doing a regular TV series for budget concerns and concerns it wouldn't sell with the main cast, there is no way in the world that an OVA budgeted show is going to happen. And since that seems to be the only way that he wants to do anime, because he wants to make sure that every little bed is made the right way, and Kenshi makes sure that he gets all of their rooms in that sequence, I just don't see it happening. It is a thing of the past, and while he will inevitably keep doing his dojins, I'm going to have to agree with Pi. I think that OVA 4 is no more. And now, theory crafting time. With all these current developments, what do you think will be the future projects for the Tenchi Muyo franchise? What are some of the projects, completely fantasy of course, that you would like to see, and what would you not like to see?
Well, I think as opposed to the last time we did this, we have a much clearer view of what's ahead than we have at any point really up to date so far in the Tenchi franchise. And it's not super clear, obviously. We don't have exact announcements and time schedules for anything, but as I alluded to before, Negishi's back, and he's back in a big way. He is not going anywhere. And I would be very surprised if we don't see some form of announcement for something animated Tenchi-wise, probably with him sometime this year. I'm guessing maybe around the summer, maybe the fall at the latest, but I would be very surprised. And I think it's going to be something more substantial than I was. I think it's going to be either a 13 or a 26 episode series, and it's all going to depend on how well I did. By all accounts, it did well on social media. It did well on viewership. The question remains to be seen how well it does financially. But if it follows to suit, it'll probably do all right. And if that's the case, then I think the point that it set out to prove will have been proven, and that point is that Tenchi can still sell a show in 2015, and I think it made that point rather well. So my bet, my personal pipe dream theory here that I'm going to put out this time is I'm betting we're going to see a more full-fledged series, more than likely with Hiroshi Negishi at the helm. As for a movie, like we talked about briefly before, I would love to see an In Love 3 or something along the lines of what Negishi has talked about animating some of the previous illustrated works. Like I think Nil and Craze, you might be able to back me up later, but I think he said something about wanting to see the Okuda manga animated in some form or another. That would be wonderful. I would love to see that. Maybe that's what we'll get. Maybe that'll be his project. He did pretty much call it out in Twitter. I'm not going to put money on that, but that would be cool. Another really cool idea is perhaps to sort of rescue the OVA from all the problems that we've just elucidated on. Go to the Hasegawa novels. Those start off in the OVA continuity. They had input from all three of the main original creators, Masaki Kajishima, Hiroki Hayashi, and Naoko Hasegawa. And there's already precedent for animating those. The Daughter of Darkness movie is an animated version of one of those novels. So that could be a thing that AIC might go for, especially if they're worried about building off of existing things and not risking a lot on something totally new, which seems to be the case, seeing as I was, as it turns out, based on script for Tenchi Muyo Love 3. So there's a lot that could happen. I think really the most clear answer I can give is that we're probably not going to see anything OVA related or Kajishima related anime in the next year before the next No Need for the Future cast. So going out on a limb, I'm saying TV show, and that's my bet.
You know, it's kind of funny because, well, first off, yes, in regards to what Chuck was saying, also on Twitter, Negishi himself said one of the things he would like to see done maybe is to see if the Hitoshi Okuda's manga could be animated, which I'm sure they'd have to make some changes to get a lot of that stuff to fit in the animated format. But, I mean, hey, that's a possibility. It's also kind of funny that Negishi posed the question on Twitter that he wondered if Kajishima would get anything further out of the way things are going now. So even Negishi doesn't really know what Kajishima's next game plan is. I don't know. As far as what I'd like to see in the future, it kind of goes back to the question that was asked earlier. I'd love to see an In Love 3. Absolutely. OVA, you know, but as was said, I don't think we're really going to see an OVA 4. If we do, it's not going to be a continuation of Kajishima stuff, but I wouldn't mind a reboot of the OVA because we can't really go anywhere with where it's been left off at. And I would, you know, OVA reboot would be fine with me. Or again, as Chuck said, animate the Hasegawa novels. You did one already with Daughter of Darkness. It started in the OVA. You could keep going with those. But for me, again, as far as getting anything new goes, a new TV series, whatever, that's not tied to anything, AIC may be a little hesitant to do that. Just because, well, it's another totally new Tenchi series. Can we do it so soon after I? Will people accept it? That type of thing. Maybe, you know, maybe they'll do it, maybe they won't. But again, I think that before anything brand new happens, anything that's its own thing, I think we need to let go of the old. Let it go, Indiana. We've been dragging all of these old continuities for so long now, mainly the OVA. They've been dragging for 20 plus years. We need to end the old even if it's just a definitive ending to one. Case in point, my idea for In Love 3. As long as we could give one of the old continuities a definitive end, that would be the definitive end that everybody would point to. And then, as I already said, we could keep going with this whole rebirth that Tenchi's been given because of I.
So, the true future of the Tenchi Muyo franchise, where will it go from here? I mean, it's really hard to say. We're basically starting almost with a blank slate again, simply theorizing that OVA 4 will not or may not happen under Kajushima's hand. How much they want to continue a currently existing timeline. Do they want to try and revisit OVA without him? They want to do a continuation of universe in the movies by doing another movie that may provide a final capstone to the very end, not just teasing who won, but actually showing who won. Finally putting the stamp on that and saying, all right, universe is over. Do they even want to revisit Tenchi in Tokyo for all the chaos that would cause in the fandom? It's hard to say. You know, I showed us that they remembered everything. They remembered the OVA. They remembered Universe. They remembered Tokyo. There was callbacks to everything everywhere. They remembered because the show is so huge. They pulled from everywhere. Will they necessarily go to any of those timelines? Will they create a mishmash of timelines like they did with I? Or will they start fresh again to get away from all the cruft that this series has had left on it from sitting in the dank basement of Kajushima's den for the past 20 years? I mean, I really don't know. You know, it's fun to theorize what could happen, you know, like with an In Love 3 and finally getting the ending that we've all wanted for that timeline, or an OVA where they finally patch everything together and say, okay, that's it, OVA is done. A whole new spin-off series, kind of like how I was, which is something that's really interesting too, was the general confusion in the fandom, at least in the American fandom. Japanese fans didn't seem to have this problem of where does I Tenchi Muyo fit on the timeline? The answer is that it doesn't. It's not universe-based. It's not OVA-based. It had callbacks to all of it. And for some reason, this is a really strange concept for people to grasp. You know, like a new timeline? What are you talking about? We haven't had one of those really since Tokyo came out. It's what it is, though. It makes references to the OVA, it makes references to universe, and so on. That doesn't necessarily mean it's any one of those timelines. It's its own thing. It's basically meta joking at, you know, remember in this timeline this thing? Yeah. Remember this timeline this thing? Yeah, it was pretty great. Like that's all it is. It was a celebration of the franchise type anime. And you know, with Tokyo, they took creative liberties with the fact that most people who'd be watching were probably already familiar with why everybody was in the house to begin with. So they didn't really do as much delving into everybody's backstories as they did with, say, Universe, or as necessary in the OVA to establish the characters in the first place. They didn't really do as much of that. They just assumed everybody who was watching kind of already knew who the fuck everybody was at this point. And for everybody who missed out, well, get watching. You know, you got better animes to be watching right now. And those are OVA 1 and Universe. So get to it. I think, realistically speaking, there's only two real ways to go from here, and that's either another spin-off entirely, you know, a Universe or in Tokyo type deal, or a final movie for Universe, and just saying, here you go. This is the end of Tenchi Evangelion. Like it's done. The rubber stamp is sealed, and that's it. There's a very big possibility that we could definitely see offshoots still from Kajushima get animated, but in terms of mainline cast, the people who most people who've watched Tenchi Muyo give a shit about, their future lies in somebody else's hands. And, you know, I don't really know where it's going to go. As Negishi had mentioned on Twitter, he was hoping, you know, maybe wishful thinking, just kind of, man, you know, it would be really nice if they animated Toshio Kuda's manga, and you know, you just see Chuck's heart just like exploding if that happened. Is that necessarily the direction that they'll go? Probably not. You know, I don't know if Okuda's interested in coming back to the series at all, you know, considering that he left a long time ago. He finished All New Tenchi Muyo quite some time ago. I think he might just be done. Who knows? They could get him back. Would they animate his mangas, or would they have him write new material, use his art designs, and create a whole new animated series after his image? That could be kind of cool. Definitely. I don't know. There's plenty of different ways where the series can go from here. Tenchi Muyo showed us that there's stuff they could pull from, like the manga or Hasegawa's remaining novels. But I don't know. It's a wide open field, and who knows where Negishi and company and the people of the Tenchi Muyo like company, as it were, they call themselves, the collective who's directing the future of the show and the future of this series, period. Who knows where their eyes are going to turn from here?
Well, I'll just start listing off here. If we can say, what do you think will happen in Fantasyland? What would you like to see, and what would you not like to see? I'll start off with I think kind of what I alluded to earlier was what Kagoshima currently has and where he's currently going in his Dojin forms with the main cast of Tenchi and now with Geminar. I don't want to see that. I don't wish ill upon the sales of his dojins or his fans or anything like that, but as far as the really, as much as there's this revival going on, I think there's still fragility with the state that Tenchi's in right now. It's going to take some careful maneuvering, not just with from a production standpoint and budgeting, but with fans. How much more can we take? How much more heartache and being torn in all these different directions can we take? So I don't really want it to go that way. I think that with as has been said, is very much it's yet another clean slate. It's like when what they ended up doing with Tokyo. It's its own thing, and if merchandise sells well enough, the Blu-ray sell, and I think certainly the new characters introduced there were endearing enough. I think you could go in that direction with a TV series, a full-blown, fully budgeted television series. I think that'd be great. I think that's very plausible. I think also plausible is probably, especially since Negishi mentioned it, is there would perhaps some reworking would need to be done, but perhaps another movie, perhaps a Tenchi Muyo in Love 3. I think the aforementioned TV series idea for is a little more likely, but I certainly would love to see another Tenchi Muyo in Love movie, and I think there's a chance of that. And I think it's important to remember for Tenchi fan, no matter what camp you find yourself in, is what can do and what has done, and it just for it existing and the fact that it happened, it got off the ground, opens doors of possibility now, and it's exciting to be talking about this even. Dreamland, I would like, I was having some forum people talking with me about this not too long ago, like continuation of universe with good old art style and stuff. That'd be awesome. I don't think that's going to happen, but hey, if we're just talking what would I love to see, also in that vein, hey, if we got AIC getting back up on its feet, how about more El Hazard? I mean, I don't know how likely that is, but that'd be wicked awesome. As would Okuda's manga being animated. I feel like Negishi, he mentioned Kagoshima specifically, wanting to meet with him, and Okuda as well. So I think he was recognizing the timing and celebration of the franchise and all that. He was giving love to other creators of Tenchi, and I think he was doing more like what we're doing now, like, oh, well, if you could see something, what would you like to see? So I don't know how likely that is. I don't want to break Chuck's heart or anyone else's heart, because I'd love to see that too. As well as, I just don't know if the fandom could take being, I don't want to say dragged through the mud again, but really, the idea of a full out reboot using Hasegawa's novels as the guide, as the template. I think logistically, it's a cool idea, and I would love to see, the eventuality of where does Hasegawa take things. I would love to see that, but as of what I've seen right now, it's great, and she was involved with the first OVA, and just the fact that so much time has gone by, I don't think we could get, for a reboot, or something like that. We couldn't get Hayashi back. I think just the way things ended, on a bad note for him, and plus he has a pattern of, I've done my work artistically, it's done, moves on to the next thing. Hasegawa, I don't know. We don't know what she's really doing right now. And of course, I don't think Kajushima would be on board for that. So if you did the reboot and started over from scratch, it could be done, but it would be with new people involved, and it'd be for an all new generation. But yeah, that's those are some of my thoughts on what could be, what I'd like to be, and what I hope to God will not be for the future of Tenchi. But it's exciting all around.
One thing you never ask a fanfiction author is, what would you like to see animated? I have a truckload of ideas that I'd love to see animated. However, realistically, what could actually be done? What would I not like to see? I've already got at length about what I don't want to see. I don't want to see essentially kids going to school and boring me to tears and having just day-to-day blah-da-da household nonsense. Give me some high space action adventure. Make some difference in the universe. That's what I want to see. Negishi has said that he says, well, why wouldn't I would like to see Okuda's manga animated? And I think someone tweeted back at him and said, if they did that, we'd want you to direct. I'm all for that. Sign me up. Okuda's manga animated, Hiroshi Negishi directing. I'm on it. Make it happen. All my money right now. I would definitely jump at that opportunity. Who mentioned an idea I've also had, which is reboot the series but use Hasegawa's novels as a template. That is actually probably just as feasible as doing the manga, and the reason is look at all the anime series that are getting reboots that are getting animated that are based off a manga series. Parasite the Maxim, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and Sailor Moon Crystal have all gotten new series in recent memory. And all of them are trying to stay as close to the manga as possible, trying to be true to the original vision. There's a theme going on right now with that in animation. Again, not many people are, economic climate and all that. People don't want to go with untested material. They want to try and stay true to something that's worked and they know will sell. Well, they know Okuda's manga has sold, and they know that Hasegawa's 13 novels have sold, and one of Hasegawa's novels, number 10 in particular, Midsummer's Eve, was transformed into the second film, which was Daughter of Darkness. So there is precedent for this. It's also very feasible because, as I understand from Nil and Crazed, who are part of our translation crew, the first novel, Hasegawa's, is a bridge between where OVA 1 episode 6, after the battle with Kagato, ends, and stuff happens. Not going to spoil it. Go read it yourself. But in short, at the end of the first Hasegawa novel, something happens, and the universal reset button, that sounds familiar, the universal reset button gets pushed, and novel 2 of Hasegawa's novels actually starts from the beginning and resets everything. So it's entirely possible that you could animate Hasegawa's novel 2 and 3, and you recover all of OVA 1 from a different point of view. Moreover, Keone Makibi shows up, more familiar faces that we haven't seen in a long time start showing up, and we'd have a fresh start. Again, since it's been, Tenchi Muyo OVA 1 came out in 1992, Universe came out in 1995, and Tokyo came out in 1997. It's been over 20 years since most of these series had started. It's been a long time since we saw Tenchi Begins. So why not do a reboot at this stage? A 20th anniversary reboot, not unusual. It's not unheard of. Moreover, I think, particularly since a lot of fans have been burned, why not? Why not go ahead and restart everything from scratch, from fresh? We've got this blank slate. Let's do this. Again, Hasegawa has mentioned in her afterword for the first novel that she was using a lot of stuff that was cut from the original storyboards from the first OVA. So this would be essentially the unabridged version of OVA 1. Except, again, OVAs don't sell anymore. That's something that's been mentioned. essentially, one reason Kajishima may not have gotten an OVA series in recent memory is because they are expensive to produce, and they just don't sell as well as TV series. They're not as publicized as TV series. Now, they could possibly go with an ONA, which is an original net animation, which is what Sailor Moon Crystal is. It's entirely possible they could go, or more likely that they could go with a TV series. How I would picture this would go is start animating at the beginning of Hasegawa novel number 2, where everything starts, and go from there up to, say, where Kageto's defeated. Maybe even go into the Seiren pirate story arc even. But the first novel, make that an OVA episode. Make that an include with the Blu-ray set or something. Essentially use it as like an episode or two OVA or ONA that goes from the OVA 6 from the original Tenchi OVA 1 and jumps into this new timeline where Hasegawa's novels start. That would be a good bridge episode. That's something that could sell a box set maybe. Especially for people who are unfamiliar with Hasegawa's work, or if they're really big fans of Hasegawa's work and want to see that particular novel done, because I like Hexagram, I love, damn it. But Complete Fantasy, I would love to see that done. Tenchi Muyo Love 3, I've already said, sign me up. I want it. I want it now. Why is it not in my Steam inventory? In the outer reaches of my fantastic view, and another reason why I want to go down Hasegawa's novels, I want to see people do something with Ayaka. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love Ryoko to death. I know, and I've shipped Tenchi and Ryoko myself, and I know that a lot of the different continuities, Universe Tokyo movies, all put Tenchi and Ryoko together. I'd love to see that ending. I'd love to. But at the end of the day, you still have to do something with Ayaka. I'd like to see Ayaka's story told as well, and give her a happy end in some way, shape, or form. Or at least deal with what would the fallout be after Tenchi's choice with her. And Tenchi Muyo Live 3 could do that. I'm betting Hasegawa's novels do that too. And I'd be happy either way.
Well, I, like so many, have already said my piece on the OVA continuity stuff, and I think really at this point, it'll be stuff like I think, all main cast things, but less about continuing in a certain storyline and just having fun with the characters. And like I've said, and like so many have said, now that the bait has been thrown out in the water, I think In Love 3 may be a thing, because there's been such an emphasis on it, and, if Hiroshi Negishi is going to pitch anything, he's probably going to want to pitch that, because that was actually an idea that they had talked about before. And then, like Crazed and Nil had talked about, there was the tweet that Negishi made about, personally wanting to see the Okuda manga made into an anime. And in my opinion, in my humble opinion, I personally think that would be the perfect next show to do, because it's classic Tenchi. Everybody loves the Okuda manga. If they follow the designs of the show, it looks more like modern anime than the original. It's an adaptation of work that's already been done. Perfect way to get old fans back in, because people would say, oh, look, it's an adaptation of the manga. It's a good way to get new fans in, because of its more, not quite completely contemporary look, but the way the design is much more conducive to newer looking anime. And you have a manga to resell on top of it. And you could do that on both sides of the pond. That would give Viz a reason to relicense and, get back in print the original No Need for Tenchi and all new Tenchi Muyo. And it would give the Japanese a reason to do it. It is the perfect marketing tool. There's literally no way to lose in that situation, because both old and new fans could get into it. As far as, complete pure fantasy, you want to talk about the last Naruto? How about the last Tenchi Muyo? Or, as me and Chuck have thrown around a number of different times, Farewell Tenchi Muyo, as a cool title. Basically, like Craze said, and like, we've talked about a number of different times, the end to the old saga, the end to Tenchi Muyo for the old fans, because, the show itself is 22 years old, 23 years old this year. Its original fans are only getting older. The original people who saw it on Toonami, who saw it in the mid-90s, who saw it in Japan when it first came out, they are not getting any younger. And they might as well capitalize on it while they still have most of the original voice actors on both sides of the field. So that way, you know, and I've said it before, I love Tenchi Muyo as a series. As much vitriol as I throw at Masaki Kajishima, I love Tenchi Muyo. That's why I do it. I am perfectly okay with having Tenchi do crazy, wacky adventures with brand new characters, as long as it's written well. If it's like I'd be on board for that. But I want to see something. I want to see something shown to the fans who've been around for a decade and a half now, saying, we're going to go forward, but this is for you. And as I've so eloquently put it in the past, a one-night stand, just as like a nice tip of the hat, and a nice capstone to the original Tenchi saga, saying, we didn't forget you. Here is the ending you were looking for. And then they can do whatever they want. So that's my pure fantasy. Farewell, Tenchi Muyo. And that is about it. Is there anything anybody would like to add?
Here's to 2015 and what that might bring for Tenchi.
All right, well, I want to thank everybody, including Chuck, who had to dart off, for being in on No Need for the Future Part 3. If you are a listener and you like what you've been listening to, subscribe to us on YouTube and follow us on iTunes. And we're pretty much on every single little bit of social media that you can think of. Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, Pinterest, anything, we're probably there. And if you want to continue to talk Tenchi, all things Tenchi, and the future of Tenchi Muyo, go to Tenchiforum.com, where, much like the carnival, the discussion never ends. Until next time, stay gold.